We have a panelist here this morning. Of course, we're holding court with Professor Noah Midamba, who's the Vice Chancellor of KCA University. Also, is an expert of defense and foreign policy. Also, we have with us Dr. Apollos Machira, a criminologist from Egerton University, Dr. Mustafa Yusuf Ali, who is a conflict resolution expert and national security expert as well. Also, we do have with us Biar Ajak, who is the Director of International Growth Center, and Dr. Mumo Nzau, who is a governance and security strategist. Right now, we can see what has happened in Gambia. There's a state of emergency. We've been talking about this, right? With all the names running behind the president, right?
Whatever. I don't know where you got this.
It is declared a state of emergency finally.
That's correct.
If this is flying in the face of what also intermediaries that we saw from ECOWAS leaders being led by President Salif Jones, and of course we can see also from Nigeria as well. We had the parliament also saying that they should accommodate him, they should give him asylum, so that for the sake of security in Gambia. State of emergency, is this really warranted?
The Gambia only produce peanut. There's not much help they produce, and this guy has been there forever and feel like the country belonged to him. And not forgetting that the days of African strongmen are over.
Yes.
What I'm pleased about is that ECOWAS has taken a substantive stand as compared to the East Africa community, where the Rwandese fellows still holding a strong position and still controlling the place. I think they're going to drive him out and most likely
by force.
By force,
yes.
And most likely lock him up, and that will be a very nice example for the rest of Africa.
All right,
these people must go.
Dr. Apollos.
Yes, I think ECOWAS must now just walk in. It's actually the Gambia is a stripe of a country, a very small stripe surrounded by Casmas in Senegal. And if you want to go, you just enter by Jew, take this guy, take him to some place so that the country can be at peace. Remember, the other day he was on a private conversation with President Johnson, because she's the head of ECOWAS. And instead of having president-to-president conversation, he taped her. Then the whole thing was broadcast throughout the world. So you can see the kind of a president we have in the Gambia.
All right, Dr. Mustafa.
Yeah, this guy, Jammeh, is a disaster. The declaration of a state of emergency is meant to preserve, or supposed to preserve, his presidency, and so he thinks. The Nigerian warships have already said, in fact, they are off the Gambian coast of the in the Atlantic Sea, and they are just ready for the time to come to dislodge Yahya Jammeh from power and have Barrow, who is the legitimately elected president of Gambia, to take over power. And that's what needs to be done. I don't think war should be declared so fast. They need to give this guy a chance, and they need to push him. They need to use all forms of coercive threats and diplomacy before the military moves in. But again, wars are messy. It's still going to cause a problem for that small country, and it's just best that this guy leaves. His ministers are resigning, and senior government officials, and he needs to see that there is nowhere to go for him.
All right, let's hear from Biar Ajak.
Well, yes, the good thing is ECOWAS actually mean business on this issue. And it's one of, as I mentioned last time, it's one of the good things about ECOWAS. They actually act when there is political crisis within the region. They take matters into their own hand and they organize instead of allowing regional interests to get ahead of individual national interests to get ahead of the national interest. It's the exact opposite of what we have in this region. In this region of Eastern Africa, when there's a crisis in one country, for example, if this was now in our region, then Yahya Jammeh may talk to somebody, one of the strong men in the region, and get a cover, and then you will find it difficult for the region to act as a united front. But in this case here, you have a region that is very much integrated, so instability in one area affects everyone else, and therefore everyone is willing to allow the regional interest to prevail over their national interest. I do hope that they make this war very quick. I don't think war is avoidable. because as you can see, this man, instead of actually him thinking of ways to step down and find like an exit strategy, he's escalating things, he's declaring himself, he's declaring a state of emergency, and this is meant basically to preserve himself in power. So I don't think there's a way the region, as ECOWAS is concerned, can prevent this conflict, but I hope they do their plans to go for a very quick and surgical efforts. Gambian military is not that serious of a military. So I think if you can do proper plans, you can even do some sort of like a hit and run tactics to have these men captured from the presidential palace and taken somewhere else.
What are the viable option of Nigeria? Because we saw the legislation saying that we should, allow asylum for him, so that for the sake of security in Gambia.
Yeah, that is a carrot, right? So they're appealing to him to say, we have a big stick on the one hand, but here's a carrot on the other. So instead of you acting as a fool as you have been doing, come to Nigeria. We'll give you one of the mansions somewhere. Just hang out there if you want to come with your witch doctors, or whatever you want to bring. You're allowed.
Let's hear from Dr. Mumo Nzau. You think we are walking also on a very dodgy ground when it comes to intervention from other countries, saying that you can force him out of power, because it's of course a republic and there is a sovereignty of that republic as well. So where is the thin line from ECOWAS where they're saying we should force him out of power for the sake of the country?
Well, international norms have evolved over time, and some of these things are no longer fashionable to do. I remember 1989 when U.S. Special Forces went into Panama and seized President Manuel Noriega. The other day in 2011 when we had President Laurent Gbagbo, just hounded out of a bunker and so on. But this is not to equate it with the bad operation in Libya. This is something else. This is someone who has, his people have elected a new leader very clearly. They were in fact counting marbles very clearly, and so they didn't even need BVR kits and all. They just counted marbles and then they just voted the guy very clear, and they even conceded, and so on. But more seriously, it's what we call the selectorate theory. Dictators have few people to please. And if they can have a small group of people who can support them, like a military and a powerful economic elite, if that one is in charge, sometimes they can get away with it. But I think the whole thing needs to be handled well. When they got into, you remember, Cote d'Ivoire, people died. In the context of Panama, people died, and such things. So it's not the best thing to do, but sometimes it becomes absolutely necessary. So people have, it's got to be well thought out, and because you just don't get armed men who are ready to fight to just surrender just like that. They can cause bad things and so on. Again, if you make the stakes too high for him, then he lacks an exit strategy. So I think the best thing also is to find ways, because it's about purposive compromises. This is someone who has been a dictator for over 2 decades. Yeah, for 2 decades over, and he came in shooting. And you just can't, he can't understand how tomorrow you'll just take him down into The Hague or someplace, and therefore don't make the stakes too high. And I think it takes a lot of statecraft and diplomacy on the part of Western Africa and Africa in general, because we have changed. That's why we left OAU into AU.
All right.
And we want things to change. So a lot of tact is required so that we don't lose lives as national security.
Thank you. Let's also take this conversation around deep and look at South Sudan and what is happening right now with this particular report that we have from the UN that numerous abuses have occurred in South Sudan. What do you make of it? What your reaction, Peter Biar, Ajak?
Well, we've been hearing a lot of these reports about this recent conflict.
Yes.
When it first started in July, I was just visiting the country, and I left 2 days before the war broke out as I was going to the NATO summit. And that's how I managed to leave Juba in time before this violence broke out. But it was a very bad violence. It happened around the time we were about to celebrate our Independence Day and anniversary of our independence. This was happening in a city, so imagining having a full-scale warfare break out in Nairobi in the middle of the daytime. This broke out at 4 p.m. while people are still in offices, while people are still in markets. And this was a dogfight with people shooting each other in the street. And then now, UN also being caught up and not necessarily acting in the way that they ought to act. The report that you just read cite an incident that happened in a hotel called Terran Hotel, where the soldiers, it's just basically a kilometer from the UN base, and there are UN troops there, and the UN was unable to come there and actually provide support to a number of different individuals that were caught up, including international and regional aid workers who were severely raped. Now, if you think of the problem of South Sudan, it's just beyond one or particular thing that you can list. You have a crisis of everything, crisis of institutions. We have a military that has not really been transformed and professionalized into a professional national military. And what is sad about that is when we signed the peace agreement in 2005, it was supposed to be one of the initial processes that we had to embark on,
Yes.
to professionalize our military. And we had a lot of support from the region, and there was a lot of willingness to do this. Unfortunately, our politicians, our political leaders, were caught up in the games of power struggle. And power struggle in terms of how do you get upper hand above your opponents in controlling the military. So over time, the incentive to actually professionalize military and to politicize it was not carried through. People became more focused about how do they maintain an advantage. And then when the power struggle started breaking out within the SPLM, you start having some generals within the SPLA recruiting from their own ethnic groups. So the notion of a national army start to break apart. And if you see even the caliber of soldiers that we have recruited and that are now patrolling South Sudan, most of them are not very well educated, largely illiterate, that come from particular ethnic groups. These are people that have not been taught about a duty of a soldier. And as Thomas Sankara once said, that you have a soldier that has not been politicized, that has not been taught about his job. This person is a potential criminal. And this is what we have seen happen in South Sudan. We have basically politicized, we have militarized our politics. We gather 50 young leaders from across South Sudan and the diaspora to come here to Nairobi. People came from the US, UK, Australia, Canada, and all over the region to come and think as young leaders, given where our elders are taking the country. What can we do as young leaders of South Sudan to bring peace to our country, to de-escalate the rising ethnic hate that is going on in the social media and in the media in the country. So the South Sudan is in a serious crisis, as I mentioned, and the challenge is now on young people, like the group that we gathered last week, to think about ways in which they can help their country and help and push the two parties to the conflict to end the conflict and give genuine peace a chance.
All right. Of course, in that particular meeting also you had the directorate or the director of National Counterterrorism Unit, Counterterrorism Center, really coming to address that particular youth meeting. What were some of the salient points that were raised during that particular address?
Debarl, I must say that I was amazingly impressed with Ambassador Martin Kimani.
Yes.
This is a man that is supremely smart, man that is a very good communicator, and genuinely a good person. He came, and the gathering was actually very, very emotional. We were meeting at Sankara Hotel. He came along with the U.S. ambassador to speak with us. And what he talks about, it was trying to relate what is happening in South Sudan to his own personal challenge and journey, because South Sudanese and Kenyans, we have interacted for a very long time. This country offer refuge to our people for many years when we were fighting for our independence. And many Kenyans are aware of the South Sudanese stories about what South Sudanese went through. And he was just reflecting from that as a person that was following and cheering South Sudanese on the struggle that were going on, the level of disappointment that is going on in the region. And then he talks about the unique opportunity the young South Sudanese have. And this is a unique opportunity of building a nation, of forging something new.
Yes.
He talks about in your country here, the generation that got your independence in 1963. He was talking how he was young. He was not really part of that generation, so he didn't really participate in that. And here, many of the people that he was addressing, the young South Sudanese, had a direct opportunity to help shape what country South Sudan become in 10 years and 20 years.
Thank you.
And although there are challenges, it's a profound opportunity and privilege to be part of that journey.
All right, thank you. All right, we shall be going on with our stories as well, but attend a reminder on what also we'll be discussing. This is in regard to the procurement of the MRPs that we saw just recently, the president deploying. That was the day before yesterday, and we're asking this question: do you think that particular deployment will heighten security in the country? Do you think that particular deployment will heighten, that is, the deployment of MRPs will heighten security in the country? Hit us on Twitter. AM Live NTV is a Twitter handle. AM Live NTV is a profile name on Facebook, and 20505 is our SMS portal. Now, Zimbabwe police have charged a local pastor who claimed God told him President Mugabe will die this year. Philip Patrick Mugadza was detained on Monday in the capital, Harare. His lawyer, Gift Mtsitsi, said that he's yet to appear in court. Mtsitsi said Mugadza was charged with unlawfully acting in a manner which is likely to create public nuisance after giving a prophecy that the 92-year-old Mugabe will die on October the 17th. Mtsitsi says police initially wanted to charge Mugadza with insulting the president. The pastor also faces charges in 3 other cases: chaining himself near parliament in protest last year, allegedly wearing the national flag without authorization last year, and staging a one-man protest. Maybe I should hear from Dr. Mumo Nzau, because you're leaving, you have a meeting, so maybe you can comment on this prophecy that never happened. This is now where it's really coming to, in regard to Mugabe.
Well, it's not a very good prophecy, because, you cannot say that, God told you that someone will die. I think it's not a good thing, though. But, of course, it's not good also for the state to take advantage of such a person and so on. There was some time back in the 80s when someone dreamt that he was a king. And then some people asked him, when you dreamt you are the king, where was our president standing? And he had to answer for that in his dream, why he thought, such things. So they can be interpreted as bad things. That's a very bad prophecy. But of course, not to take advantage or harm the man and so on. It sounds funny, but it's a serious thing. Yeah, so, the President Mugabe will not die in October 17. He will live until when the gods say so. Yeah. Okay,
so he will live and rule beyond the grave, as we have.
No,
he
will serve his term. He will serve his term. I think he's not going to stand again for president.
No, he's declared he's going to stand for in 2018.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. If the people accept, then so be it.
And he actually doesn't need to stand up and go and campaign, because as we have seen in Algeria, Bouteflika, the last time he won an election, he didn't go for any rally. He just had other people go and talk for him. And he doesn't even chair the cabinet meetings anymore. And he's still the president. So Mugabe may still rule beyond the grave.
Let's tie in the Trump transition with Obama legacy. And before we took also a short break, we'd raised very poignant questions that there is an information that was leaked and questions that maybe were raised by the Trump administration right now. Maybe we could go blow by blow looking at this particular. One of them was the issue of corruption. And Ali had said that they were asking, with so much corruption in Africa, how much of our funding, that is the United States, is stolen? Why should we spend these funds on Africa when we are suffering here in the US? Professor.
We need to take a look at the issue shaping up under Trump administration very carefully. By number one, look at the people he has appointed. Right now, he has 29 top people that have been appointed already. 24 of them are white men who have no background in Africa at all. He has 4 white women, and he has 1 token black person who says from Turkana. We will see how that works. But this guy is coming in and demonstrating a serious, unpredictable world. Okay, whether it is Europe, the way it's known with NATO, and the whole global system since the Second World War. This is very threatening because we don't know which way it's going to go. But what is so clear is that it's going to try to unwind or undo Obama's legacy. Obama's legacy, let me say this. I was at, and I participated in the first election of President Obama. I was very, very active. I was a co-chair in the state of Ohio, particularly in Cleveland area. And I went through and studied Obama strategies very carefully. Obama, number one, came in a very terrible economy that was left for America. Americans were angry about the situation, and Obama had to respond to that. Secondly, American these doubters consider Obama an American, is a Kenyan, is African. And if Obama come out blessing and focus on Africa, Obama was not going to even get elected the second time. While he raised conscious of America about Africa, what I think Obama was planning to do is once he leave office, and that is the very reason he fought very hard for Hillary Clinton to be president, then he will have the chance to do much more for Africa outside the presidency that it was. Because Africans did not help him. Africans were not prepared. Africans did not line up with the forces.
We didn't really take advantage.
We didn't take advantage of Obama, historical advantage. Okay. We never know when this thing is going to happen. Now let me say a few more things. It is possible that Trump is going to remove the big program of Power Africa, which is aligned to President Obama. It's going to cut out AGOA, which has helped particular Kenya with the coffee and all that kind of thing. It's going to curtail emergency program for aid while Africa is still ravaged by aid. He will cut or curtail US aid. That is a very serious undertaking. And lastly, it's going to cut or curtail military aid. Without American support for international, for United Nations, and for Africa in particular.
Thank you.
Our efforts in fighting Al-Shabaab and Boko Haram is completely weakened.
All right. Okay, maybe also this should be tackled by you, Dr. Mustafa. On terrorism, the documents asks why the United States is even bothering to fight the Boko Haram insurgency in Nigeria, where all the schoolgirls kidnapped by the group have not been rescued, and whether Al-Qaeda operatives from Africa are living in the United States. And it questions the effectiveness of one of the more significant counterterrorism efforts on the continent.
That's a legitimate question.
Maybe I should tie it also with the next, because I think they're turning. Yeah.
Yes.
They're saying we've been fighting Al-Shabaab for a decade. Why haven't we won? They posed one question referring to the terrorist group based in Somalia that was behind the Westgate Mall attack in Kenya in 2013. Why haven't we won? Maybe we should be asking ourselves these pertinent questions. We've been fighting also the Al-Shabaab in Somalia as the Kenyan defense forces. Why, until now, haven't we won?
Yeah, very legitimate question. And Trump should be the first one to know why we have not won this war. Trump should be the first person to understand why the United States of America has actually not won this war since 9/11, when it committed a tremendous amount of US dollars, monies, military arms, equipment, and men and women that was sent to Afghanistan, sent to Iraq to fight and diminish, degrade, and win the so-called war on terror. And Trump will discover that one of the reasons why the United States of America and the Western allies have actually not won this war is because it has used a lot of military tactics to try and address this whole issue of terror without caring much about the ideologies that feed onto terrorism. And I suspect that Trump feels, or rather thinks, that he is going to use more military might to fight and totally win this war. And that is not going to happen until and unless the world, and led by Americans, because they have the resources to do this, address the issue of ideology that undergirds terrorism, where there's a lot of push and pull for many young people to join these terror groups. Then the US and the world is not going to win this war. It's going to be a very difficult. Since 9/11, I said this before, that not a single terrorist group has been vanquished. Instead, many more have come out, much more vicious and savage, like ISIS, which was not in existence in 2001. And Trump, the US, they have to ask these questions. It is a legitimate question. In Africa, Boko Haram, Al-Shabaab, we have to ask the Somalis, why is it that Al-Shabaab is still, the Somalis have to answer this question. Somalis have an answer to this question. Nigerians have an answer to the issue of Boko Haram. Corruption comes in.
Yes.
Corruption comes in. And these are questions that I know Trump is going to ask, legitimately so, and the leaders in these countries have got to answer this question.
Right, good. And let's also give this question to Dr. Apollos Machira. They ask, we've been hunting Kony for years. Is it worth the effort? They ask. Poses another series of questions related to Joseph Kony, the warlord head of Uganda's violent guerrilla group, the Lord's Resistance Army, who has eluded the authorities for 3 decades. It says the LRA has never attacked U.S. interest. Why do we care? Is it worth the huge cash outlays? I hear that even the Ugandans are not looking to stop searching for him, since they no longer view him as a threat. So why do we?
When we deal with someone like John Kony, or when we deal with the ISIS or Boko Haram, Al-Shabaab, we are dealing with the values. Value conflicts are very difficult to resolve. Because first they are dealing with the ideologies, they are dealing with the beliefs that you believe in. The Lord's Resistance Army has values that are religious in nature, and that makes it very difficult because they believe in value. So when you think about eliminating these people, some of these people are ready to die. And that is why these suicide bombers can go to Amsterdam, they go to Paris, they go anywhere, because they are ready to die. So trying to prevent them is very, very difficult. And that's why you find the world's most difficult conflict is between the West and the Muslim world, because of the Islamic liberation ideologies. Some verses in the Quran, when they are read differently, can lead young people to commit very serious offenses. So we can deal with these resources, we can deal with other sources of conflict, but when it comes to value, we have a long haul. And then the Americans, and this Trump now, the Americans are very far from Africa. In fact, when you are in Chicago and think about Africa, you wonder why you should spend money. And when that money comes, maybe in small doses, some of us in Nairobi spend that money here in Nairobi. Sometimes we can fundraise for children in Turkana So we take photographs of malnourished children, we take them to the Europe, we take to America. But when the money arrives in Nairobi, it is used here in a very luxurious way. When we visit those famine-stricken areas, we go there as visitors with very big vehicles, with the antenna, these radio calls, eating biscuits, carrying water where there is no water. So we are very extravagant when it comes to using donor funds. And that is why some of them perhaps are getting annoyed with our misuse, our corrupt nature. Just the way the countries are corrupt, even the NGOs.
Thank you. All right, let's hear from Peter, Biar, Ajak. Maybe you might want to wind up on that. Then we'll get 30 seconds from you about the MRPs also that were deployed in this country on Monday. Peter.
Well, I think Trump's, the question that he's asking on aid are legitimate, and I will advise his transition team to read my paper.
To read your paper?
I wrote a paper a few years ago that was published by Harvard University that tried to address the failure of aid, using the case of South Sudan to look at the larger structural problem with aid. It's not something that can be blamed on Africa alone, but it's also related to the design of some of these aid programs, which are sometimes designed on assumptions that are not based on reality. But you see, the question Trump is asking on terrorism and these are the issues that he's raising, they're all legitimate. The only problem is I wonder whether they're actually even genuine, because during the whole campaign, he has not even raised any of these issues, right? He was talking about crooked Hillary and all these other things. We didn't even get a sense of what he actually thinks when it comes to policy. But he should not be asking about Al-Shabaab or asking about Boko Haram. He should be asking also about Al-Qaeda. They've been fighting Al-Qaeda since 2001, as it was put before.